My name is Alex and I'm a compulsive gambler. When I first said these words over 3 months ago, my life was in shambles. It had been torn apart due to a 5-year gambling addiction which I struggled with from the ages of 19 to 24. I was finally ready to get help for this addiction. In this channel, in this video, I'll be documenting my recovery journey, how I'm helping myself, and hopefully I can help you guys along the way. I first started gambling when I was 19, a freshman in college with the world at my fingertips. Throughout high school, I always knew I wanted to gamble because I was a big sports fan, and I thought just making money off of watching sports, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, I thought I'd be able to do that for a career. I didn't have to work. I didn't have to do anything. I could just use my knowledge of sports and then end up making money off of that. And we all have those dreams, or everyone in this addiction has had those dreams. But ultimately, it ends the same way. You're not going to be able to make money. You're not going to be profitable. It's just going to end in a pit of despair and at multiple rock bottoms, which had happened to me personally. So throughout the years of 2019 and 2020, it wasn't super intense, my gambling. Like, I got into it right away and I was super in depth with it. I was keeping track of all my bets and everything, and I just thought it was a real cool hobby to happen. Probably the first big win I had was in the Super Bowl of 2020. It was when the Chiefs and 49ers were playing. I thought I was the smartest person alive for taking the Chiefs and taking Mahomes to win the MVP of the Super Bowl. And he ended up getting the MVP, obviously, and that night at college was just a great night. I remember it in depth, like vividly, but that led to the spiral of eventually 4 years later, I was sitting in that church basement saying the words that I'm a compulsive gambler, and still getting help to this day. So throughout college, I had an up and down relationship with gambling. I didn't have too much money at this time, so all the money I did come into was pretty much gone right away. I made a new bank account so I didn't have to have my dad watching over my transactions, and I just went to work, There's two sports that ended up sticking with me were tennis and soccer, because if you know anything about those two sports, is they're on all parts of the world at all hours of the day, and that's what appealed to me. Basketball, NBA, or football, the NFL, was only on at night, and football was only on certain days of the week, maybe like 3 days, Sunday, Thursday, and Monday, or Saturday if you're talking college football, but that's besides the point. Tennis and soccer were on basically 24/7. So whenever I needed action, I could get it through those two sports, and I became obsessed with those. While people were out at bars, partying in college, and just having a normal life, I was cooped up in my room watching sports for hours on end. I wouldn't leave. Like, my two roommates literally thought I was depressed, and I've told them now after the fact, and they thought it made sense because they knew I was gambling, but they didn't know it was a problem. I used to tell them I was winning. I used to tell them I was some big shot with all this money, but in reality, I was just spiraling further and further out of control. While they were having fun, having girlfriends and everything, I was just sitting at home by myself watching tennis. It's pretty sad to say now, but that's how my life was for 5 years. And there were sustained periods where I did win money, And at this time, I was using offshore books, so I was withdrawing in Bitcoin. So I had all that Bitcoin sitting here, and then Bitcoin itself, the price went up a lot. So at a certain point, I was sitting on a lot of money. And to me, that was on top of the world. No one could tell me anything. No one could tell me I had an addiction because I had all this money here. That's proof I don't have an addiction, I'm a good gambler is what I thought. And I told myself I was never going to touch this Bitcoin. I was going to save it to use it for a down payment of a house or save it for investments when I was older. I just really didn't want to gamble it away. But as my other money began to dwindle down, all the money I got from my summer jobs was gone. Eventually, I tapped into that Bitcoin. And slowly but surely, I lost it all. This was around the time I was a junior, so probably around 2022, where I was just completely broke again, square one. And I had opened up a credit card, and I found the new world of betting on credit, which I had done before on a bookie, but they didn't really offer me too much credit as I was just a freshman with no real reputation. So I had I'm not going to get into specific amounts here, but the credit card gave me a lot more rope to work with, I guess. And I found that I could Venmo the bookie with my credit card, So I was basically sending him the credit from my account so I didn't have to take a cash advance or anything. And it didn't really set off any alarms. I thought it was just normal, just trying to get my losses back and stay in action. All I really cared about was staying in action, not even the wins or losses at that point. I just wanted to have 24/7 where I had a bet going. If I didn't have a bet going, I was anxious, I was nervous, and I just didn't want to live, That's all I lived for was gambling for that 5 years. And at this time, my roommates probably thought I was depressed because all I did was stay in my room 24/7. The only times I got out were either to go to class, which was rare. Honestly, I didn't go to class too much, which I regret now, or to go get fast food because that's all I ate at that time. I didn't care about my body, didn't care about my physical or mental health. All I cared about was staying in action. I remember one time, well, because they had always asked me to go out with them, go out to the bars, go out to parties. I always said no. One, because I'm just naturally more of an introverted person, but two, I never really wanted to get away from my bed, my computer. That's all even if I went, I would be on my phone the whole time checking the score. So I thought might as well just stay at home and watch the game myself. But yeah, so this one time they came back about 3 a.m. after a night out. They were all drunk. They had some girls with them too. I was still sitting in my room and I was awake from the night of gambling. At this time, there was no real sports on, so I went into the online casino and the blackjack in my sports book, and I was losing tons and tons of money because I had made money that day. I was up a lot, and I just heard them come home. I was mad, I was pissy, I was irritable, and I was losing tons of money in the next room while they thought I was asleep, while they were outside having a normal college experience. And so this went on for basically my entire college career, I guess. I was somehow able to graduate with my degree, which I'm still thankful for to this day. I did basically the bare minimum enough to get the degree and get out of there. And so when looking for a job, I found something, but it was out of state. I thought this would be a good experience to kind of get away from everything and just kind of reset my mental, but it ended up being the worst thing for me. So I moved to this new state after graduation, and I had some disposable income from my job since I didn't really have too many expenses at the time besides my rent. And you can guess where all my disposable income went. It went straight to the bookies, straight to the sports book, straight down the drain. This year was probably the worst time for my addiction because it was left unchecked. I had no family, no roommates, no friends, literally nobody in that state with me. It was just me and my addiction just left on our own. And that was terrible for me. From sun up to sundown, literally 24/7 was all I did. And it's what I did in college too, but at least in college I had some structure. I had roommates, I had classes, exams, and certain things which I didn't put much effort into, but at least I had to do them. Here all I had was work, where I was remote some days. When I was working remote, literally I did not work at all. I don't know how I kept that job. Even when I was in the office, I was barely paying attention. I was watching tennis or soccer on my phone the whole time. So it just got really, really bad, and I needed to come home. And at this time, I was trying to quit for about 2 years, half-heartedly, I guess. I wanted to get help. I looked for help, but there was really no resources available in this state like there is in my home state. So I couldn't find anything. I tried, but I never really put the full effort into it, where I never really surrendered to my addiction, as they say in the program. So after about 11 months, I came home and I got a different job in my home state, and I moved back in with my mom. And I was still gambling for really about 7 to 8 months while I was at home. And eventually it just hit a rock bottom point. I was opening more credit cards. I was exhausting all resources, as I like to say. I used to go through the bookies, every bookie in my contact, begging them for credit, every single credit card. Obviously, all my money was gone, since as soon as I got money, it was gone at that point. Sometimes I kept it for a couple days, but even if I was winning, it was just going to be gone soon enough. So after a bit of time at home, after another paycheck gone within hours, I used to stay up till midnight until my paycheck hit, and it would be gone before I went to work the next day. So after that happened for one more time, it kind of pushed me over the edge, and I knew I needed to get help. So that next day after work, I went to my first GA meeting. And so that was kind of a brief overview of my gambling addiction. There's tons more depth and tons more stories I'm sure I'll go into on this channel in the future. But that was just kind of a brief overview to give you like a kind of background on my addiction and then how I got help. So eventually I went to that meeting and I didn't really think I belonged. There were some older people there. I was like, oh, this isn't for me. I'm not at that level. So I didn't really give it the full effort. Plus, at that time, I didn't tell my parents. So I ended up going to that meeting, and I didn't go back for a little bit, and I went back to gambling eventually. And so when I went back, I actually had a pretty good spell of gambling. I won some large sums of money, and you could probably guess the next day everything was gone. And I just had a realization, like, I don't even need to be doing this. Like, I have a decent job, a solid income, don't have expenses, I'm living at home. I'm just gambling just for the fun of it at this point. And it wasn't fun. It hadn't been fun for years up to this point. It was maybe fun for about the first 6 months, but after that, it just turned into a compulsion that I couldn't get rid of no matter what. So at that time, when I lost the sums of money that I won, I broke down. I had to tell my parents. It was going to be the only way I could get help. I had to have them watch over my finances. I had to commit to the program, and I had to really make an effort to turn my life around. So my dad was coming over for dinner that night. It was Sunday, April 13th, 2025. It was 45 days ago to this day. I told them at dinner that I'm a compulsive gambler and I need help. And it was really scary. I broke down crying when I said it. They were also crying. It was an emotional scene, but I needed to do it, and I felt really good. They were supportive of me, and they wanted me to get help, and they were happy I told them. They had suspected, because it was pretty obvious, like, if you knew me, that I was a gambler. You knew I tried to have that big shot ego, and they knew that I was isolating. I was watching sports, and even one time in college, I had to call my dad to bail me out, but he had thought that, I slowed down, and they always thought I was gambling, but they didn't know the extent of it, I guess. But yeah, so that was 45 days ago today, and I haven't bet since that day. And it's not a long period of time. There's people in my program, in my meetings, that are, 12, 15 years clean. I'm only 45 days. I'm not even 2 months. But in these 45 days, I've had a lot of realizations and a lot of positive moments that are going to keep me away from gambling. So first off, I self-excluded in my state. I can't bet no matter what I do. Like, there's no way I can open any accounts or walk into any casino in my state. So that was a big help. I used to do it in individual sports books. Like, I would ban myself from one book, but another one would always pop up. So that never really worked, because I also had the offshore books too, which I could always go onto those even if I banned myself from the legal ones. So banning myself from all the sports books, I gave control of my finances back over to my dad, where basically it's like what's called like a college account, like a Chase college account under his account, where he can see my transactions. He doesn't like have control of my account, but he can see, if I deposit money into a sports book, he'll know, and then it'll just kind of stop me in my tracks. Like, I haven't even really had the thought to do it recently. And it really took some humility to do that. I didn't want to do it for the longest time. I didn't want to tell them. I kept pushing it down the road, like, oh, you'll win one, you'll get everything back, you don't need to do this, don't tell them, they're not going to get you, they're going to kick you out. I just kept making up scenarios in my head about how they'd react, but in the back of my mind, I always knew they'd be supportive, but I just told myself that they wouldn't be, to justify not telling them, if that makes sense. I just wanted to keep my addiction going for as long as possible, but the time was right then, and I had to tell them, and that's what I did. And since that day, I've been a completely different person. I've finished 7 books since that day. I've been playing chess a lot. I got back to just playing basketball, shooting around with my friends, things we used to do like back before I was gambling, just having fun outside, where I would never have thought to do that while I was gambling. I only thought about myself. Even just building relationships back with my sister, with my grandma, just being a more positive person overall. It's like I'm making up for lost time. Like, I had 5 years where my brain was just completely dormant. Even though I went through college during that time, I didn't learn anything. All I learned was about the odds and the books, So now I'm just trying to grasp at everything. I'm like a kid in a candy shop. I'm trying to gain all this knowledge about different topics, reading books about many different subjects, doing better in work, actually applying myself to my job instead of just half-assing it, watching tennis all day, playing outside, going to the gym, It's actually just really positive for me. So now I'm going to 2 Gamblers Anonymous meetings every week. I'm going to therapy once a week, and those 3 meetings are like kind of my medicine, like my rock. I need those on a weekly basis, or else I might slip back into gambling. Like, I'm by no means out of this. There's still a lot left. Even just the other day, I saw an ad for the French Open, the tennis French Open, and I got those thoughts going through my head, those French Open, those Grand Slam tournaments used to be like my heaven. There's so many games going on, so much things to bet on, where now I see that and I know that I don't have access to my finances. I know what would happen. I'd have to go to my meetings and tell them I relapsed. I don't want that. I just want to move forward and leave this gambling in the past. I think of all the damage it's done to me, how much it's affected me and affected my life, how much it's done to my family. Think about my mom crying when I told her, and I don't want that again. I just want to move forward in a positive way. And I think this channel is going to help me do that. So I really appreciate you guys listening to this. I know it may not be the best. It's my first time doing something like this. I'm going to get better, I'm going to keep going at it, keep going one day at a time, and hope you guys can follow along for the ride. If you guys are struggling with a gambling addiction, just know you're not alone. I know how dark and depressing it can get when you're in the midst of it, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. Comment below how many days free from gambling you have. If it's more than me, less than me, maybe you're still in your addiction, but you want to quit. And maybe this video can push you over the edge to quit. I'm hoping it does. I just want to make this a community where we can all get better together. And I really appreciate you guys for listening. So until next time, this has been Lex Recovery.